Hello, welcome back. We are on to our second mini lesson for chapter 1. So I've broken this section down into the listing of the necessary life functions. So we have necessary life functions and survival needs kind of all combined together into this one video. So we're going to be going over the things that living organisms need to survive and to be able to carry out all of the functions of living things. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing that is mentioned in your book is this idea of boundaries. So we have lots of different kinds of boundaries in our day-to-day life, right? We have our walls in our house. We have the structure of our car, keeps our bodies out safe from as we're traveling down the road. So in our living systems, we also have to have boundaries. So the first one we have over here, get my little marker going. These are cell membranes. So cell membranes are vital to maintain life because if you remember in the first video, I said cells are the basic unit of living things. If you didn't have that plasma membrane or that cell membrane to kind of keep everything inside of a cell together, you would just have a big pile of organelles and it would not be considered living anymore. So that physical barrier, this physical boundary of the plasma membrane keeps all the cell components in, helps to regulate homeostasis, separates cells from the outside world. So cell membranes are kind of the most important boundary for living things because without them, we would not have living things. A little bit more of a larger scale on the idea of boundaries. We have skin, right? So here's a diagram of skin. You're going to be learning about that in chapter 4, your first body system. And then we also have membranes. So this is what's called a sagittal section. You'll be learning that word in lab this week, as well as in the language of anatomy video here in a little bit. But we can see we are quite organized inside of our abdominal pelvic cavity. We have all of these membranes to help organize our stomach and our liver and all of the twists and folds of our small and large intestine, separating out our abdominal pelvic cavity from our thoracic cavity. So boundaries are important to maintain life. In the case of the plasma membrane, for our skin, it helps us keep the outside germs and bacteria and chemicals and toxins outside of our body, keeping our more delicate, softer tissues safe. And we also use membranes and boundaries to help organize within an organism. All right, the next one is movement. So necessary life functions. Now, not all living things move, or what you think of movement is like locomotion, right? So plants don't get up and walk around like animals do, but they still have movement. They have movement of water up from the root system to their leaves, and from sugars from leaves down into their root system. So when we say movement, I'm not specifically talking about locomotion. Just movement in any regard. So I've shown a few examples. Clearly, the muscle guy running is an obvious example of movement. This one here, peristalsis, is the muscular contraction of your, usually your digestive tract, but you have some peristalsis in other systems as well, as a smooth muscle through your, say, esophagus or your small intestine, your stomach kind of squishes your bolus of food down through your tract. We have movement of blood being circulated and pumped through our circulatory system, heart, arteries, capillaries, veins, back to the heart. And then we also have these little cilia. So this is a cell, and on its surface, there's these little hair-like structures called cilia, and they beat like this. They line part of our upper respiratory tract, and they beat in unison, and they help to propel mucus and debris either up to your pharynx for swallowing or spitting out or whatever. So these are just all different examples of movement, which is one of our necessary life functions. Okay. The next one is called responsiveness. So as a living thing, we need to be able to respond to our environment. And there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So I've just shown a few examples. Goosebumps might show up if you are cold or nervous or scared. That also can come from your response to the situation of what's going on. The pupils, the black circle in our eyes, which is actually a hole into our eyeball, can react to light stimuli, whether it's dark or whether it's light, or that can also be a nervous reaction to a stressful situation. Sweating, kind of the opposite of goosebumps. You get cold, you get goosebumps, you get hot, you sweat. So your body's responding to the temperature change. And then this bigger picture on the bottom is a reflex. So reaction to pain. So if you touch something hot, your body just automatically responds to that stimuli, moving your limb out of danger. So this is what we call responsiveness. Sometimes it's called responding to stimuli. So the stimuli would be the temperature or the light or the pain. Those are the things that your body is responding to. Right? The next necessary life function is kind of comboed digestion and metabolism. So think of digestion as a larger scale topic. So you consume nutrients via food, like this apple that this diagram, this person is eating. So we are digesting, we're taking these large chunks of food and we break them down into their smaller subunits. Again, we're going to be learning about those major macromolecules like carbohydrates and proteins and lipids in chapter 2. So that's the job of the digestive system and digestion. Metabolism then is going to take those, food bits, the fats and the sugars. They're going to go into your cells, and we have an organelle in your cell called the mitochondria. You may or may not have heard that before. We're going to see that in chapter 3. The mitochondria is what we call the powerhouse of the cell. So what it does is it takes those nutrients, the sugars and the fats, breaks them down to release energy. This type of energy is called ATP. We're going to see it quite a bit more as we progress through these chapters. And it is the energy in ATP that allows our cells to do work. So what does that work mean? It could be the contraction of a muscle. It could be the secretion of sweat or a hormone. It could be the manufacture of proteins like antibodies to protect you from getting sick. So all of these cell functions need energy to do that. It comes from ATP. And our cells make ATP by the food that we take in. So we eat food, our digestive system breaks that down into the components like sugars and fats, and then our cells can metabolize that into ATP, which then is used for cells to do their functions, to do the physiology of whatever they need to do. Okay. The next one is excretion. So I have a comic here showing a gentleman on the toilet. So excretion, we have a couple different types of excretion. The main ones are defecation, which is pooping, and urination, which is peeing. So the reason why we do these things is in the process of digestion and circulation and metabolism, we produce waste products. That's just the way animals work. And so we have these body systems to get rid of those waste products. So the undigested food that we cannot strip the nutrients away, there's leftovers. So we get rid of that via pooping. In the kind of more cellular level, in the process of breaking down those nutrients, we produce waste products, usually called nitrogenous waste. If you've ever heard of urea or creatinine or ammonia, these are all nitrogen-containing compounds that we have to get rid of. Otherwise, if they keep circulating throughout our body, they're poisonous to us. So the kidneys are the filter. They filter out all of the bad stuff, and then we pee that out. What I haven't shown here is sweat is also your skin is like an excretory organ. It can get rid of some electrolytes, some ions as you sweat as well. But your digestive system, pooping, and your urinary system, peeing, are your major forms of excretion. And then we have reproduction. So just on a large scale of life itself, living things need to be able to reproduce. You have to make more of your species, otherwise you go extinct. So there's not much to that. And then growth. So growth is our last necessary life function. So I have kind of a sequence of events from birth till old age for a whole organism in their lifespan. But we can also see growth within a single organism through the process of cell division. So we'll be learning about this process in chapter 3. It's called mitosis, where a single cell eventually becomes 2 daughter cells. Okay, so this is just cell copying themselves to allow you to grow from a baby to an adult to older age. All right, so those are our necessary life functions. We had maintaining boundaries, movement, responsiveness, digestion and metabolism, excretion, reproduction, and growth. So the next few slides are just going to be our survival needs. So what is it that our bodies require or our cells require to be able to carry out all of these life functions? The first one listed here is nutrients. I've mentioned this briefly when we're taking a look at digestion and metabolism. So the major nutrients that we need are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So carbohydrates, things like breads, fruits and vegetables, and grains. I've shown a picture of this is glucose, which is a very common sugar, what we call a monosaccharide. These are the next nutrient is proteins. So these are things that you find in meats, cheeses, and dairies, and beans. So proteins are very large molecules made up of amino acids. I don't know the name of this particular picture, but those we'll just call it protein. Proteins are very diverse. Okay. And then the last category is fats, or what we call lipids, a group of macromolecules called lipids, which typically are found in oils and fats, and waxes and cholesterols and things like that. And this is a molecular picture of a fatty acid. So remember in our first mini lesson, we talked about the levels of structural organization. We started with atoms and molecules. So here, take a look at the glucose picture over here. We have oxygen as an atom, carbon is an atom, and hydrogen is an atom. So we can take a look, all of those letters, the C's, the O's, and the H's represent the atoms that come together in this very special structure, in this very special way of bonding that gives us this glucose molecule that then our cells can use to drive that mitochondrial action to produce ATP. So all three of these are needed for energy, and proteins are used for structural, like to build things. So think of proteins as like our scaffolding and our structural components. Carbohydrates and fats are mostly for energy. Fats can do some structural things too. We'll see this more in chapter 3. Okay. All right, some other survival needs, oxygen. Well, most of us know that if we don't breathe, we die, but we may not know why. So I've just showed a few pictures to represent oxygen. So here's the atom of oxygen over here in the corner. It's got a nucleus and some electrons floating around the outside. Again, we'll talk more about atomic structure in chapter 2. This is molecular oxygen, which is an O2 gas. So it's two oxygen atoms together. This picture is showing in the lungs, way down at the microscopic level, how oxygen from what we breathe in moves into the bloodstream, and our waste product of carbon dioxide is exhaled out. So every time we breathe in oxygen, and when we exhale carbon dioxide. And that's all great. So that's what the atom looks like. This is where we exchange, we get our oxygen in our lungs. But what does oxygen actually do? Well, a couple slides back, we talked about mitochondria and it produced ATP. Well, oxygen right here is at the very last step of this process called the electron transport chain. And take a look at the product. We get lots of ATPs being produced at the end of this electron transport chain. And the only way that will work for aerobic organisms like us, aerobic means requires oxygen, is we need that oxygen to come in at the very last step of this electron transport chain. If we don't have oxygen, this whole process stops. We lose our ATP, our cells die, and if our cells die, our organs die, and if our organs die, we die. So that's why we can't live longer than 2 to 3 minutes usually. I mean, there's some exceptions without oxygen, because our neurons are the first ones to go, and so we get brain damage, our heart stops beating, and then none of our cells get oxygen when our circulation stops. So oxygen is required to make ATP in a process of what we call aerobic respiration, which is what the mitochondria do, right? Our mighty mitochondria. Right? Water. So water is important. Here's a couple pictures of water molecule. Remember, water is H2O. You may or may not know that. It is made up of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. All of our chemical reactions have to happen in the presence of water. So if we don't have water, our chemical reactions don't happen. Our cells kind of come to a standstill. And if our cells aren't working, we cannot survive. So water is definitely required for us to live. So there is, what's the saying? The rule of 3s, right? So you can live without oxygen for about 3 minutes, you can live without water for about 3 days, and you can live without food for about 3 weeks. So those are all of our survival needs. We needed nutrients, we needed oxygen, and we need water. So if you can remember that 3-3-3, so 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 weeks on average, those are our survival needs. And if we don't have those within those time frames, then we're going to be in big trouble. All right, so we need a proper temperature. So we'll be learning in chapter 2 about these molecules called enzymes. So enzymes are specialized proteins. Their job is to catalyze chemical reactions. They make reactions happen a lot faster, but they're pretty picky. They do their best work at body temperature, which is 98.6 Fahrenheit degrees or 37 Celsius degrees. Okay. If we go above or below that, if we go below 37 degrees, enzymes work really slowly. Chemical reactions slow down, everything slows down so much so that we cannot maintain life. If it goes above that over a certain range, we have an acceptable range. That's why fever is okay to some degree. But if it gets too hot, those enzymes start getting destroyed, and it's called denaturing. So the enzymes start to denature, they can't do their jobs, they can't catalyze the chemical reactions, your cells stop working, and then you die. So that's what we call a severe fever or hyperthermia if you're too hot, or hypothermia if you're too cold. So proper temperature is essential for your cells to function with those enzymes. All right, and then the last thing, which it seems a little bit abstract, but we'll put it in here because the book talks about it, is atmospheric pressure. So I've got a picture of Mount Everest on the left and a picture of our moon outside of our atmosphere on the right there. And then the picture on the top is just showing you that the air that we breathe is a mixture of gases. So about 80% is nitrogen gas, which you really don't think about too often. Our oxygen that we need for that survival need is about 21%. And then we have about 2-ish% of other gases like argon and water vapor and carbon dioxide. Gives us about 100% of our atmosphere. But we have to have this particular pressure, because if we go too high, like this top of Mount Everest, it's really hard for our body to function physically. And clearly in space, we have to have artificial atmospheric pressure because our bodies have evolved and adapted to live at this particular pressure. So if we change that, our body won't work anymore. Right? Okay, so that was our maintaining life, necessary life functions and survival needs. So that wraps up our second mini lecture. Third mini lecture, second, I can't remember where we're at, just the second one. All right, so the next one we're going to take a look at is homeostasis. So we'll see you next time. Bye.